Hey everybody, welcome to episode 76 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back, welcome aboard, welcome to 2019. I can't think of a better episode to start this year off with than this one. It's all about change. It's all about taking chances. We are speaking to Marinel de Jesus. She was an attorney for 15 years who left her career to become a permanent nomad and start an adventure travel company called Peak Explorations. Some of you may be familiar with her already. Online, she goes by the name Brown Gal Trekker, and she posts to several social media and blog areas and writes for a number of online publications as well. This is one of those episodes that just barely happened. We just happened to be crossing paths as she finished the JMT and was passing through Los Angeles when I was back in Los Angeles, and we were able to meet at a park in downtown Los Angeles one afternoon and record this before she left the state entirely. Do know that that park was a bit noisy, and there are street performers who begin playing music and dancing partway through this episode, so do be prepared for that, but it should not impede hearing anything anyone says or the experience at all. So sit back with whatever eggnog you have left and let's kick this new year off right and go talk to Marinel de Jesus.
Marinel de Jesus. I am a founder of a company. It's a mountain trekking company called Peak Explorations and also a media platform called Brown Gal Trekker. And I'm actually a former prosecutor, worked in Washington, D.C. for 15 years. I ditched that job and career in 2016. No, actually 2017. It feels longer, but it is 2017 last year, a year ago, just to become a full-time entrepreneur and just become a nomad, actually, and spend more time in the mountains.
So that's a lot to digest, right? You don't often hear, oh, I was a successful person, and I'm going to throw that away to take on this. Actually, on this show, you probably hear it more often than on other shows. But let's talk about that. So now you're basically a full-time explorer, hiker, adventurer, however you want to define yourself. Before you were a prosecuting attorney, right? So what was that early part of your life like? Did you start out in the outdoors, or is this something you discovered much later and then decided you wanted to change the direction of your life?
It was definitely much later in life. Well, actually, I was born in the Philippines, so I actually migrated to America when I was 13. So my family, we weren't really wealthy or anything. So to go outdoors is quite expensive. I mean, you have to have the gear. You can't just walk in flip-flops, right? I grew up basically in a family where it's about survival. So you come to America, parents will tell you, you got to survive. You got to make something out of yourself. And the proof of that in my life is I became a lawyer. I focused on a lot of like the career type of thing, and hobby-wise, I did the typical city life kind of thing. And so for a while, I was actually kind of a city girl. I loved New York City. I moved to Washington, D.C. from Seattle, where I went to University of Washington for my law degree and my master's. So after moving to D.C., I decided I'm going to, basically do litigation and got a job. Got lucky because I got the job right after law school. I got to clerk with judges. And then my career started. So I thought, okay. So my story started out very plain. It was get a career and then maybe get married and have a house. I did get the house. I did get the career. There was never a marriage, but actually it was a blessing in disguise. At first it was, as a woman, it was such a pressure, right? So in my 30s, I started feeling like there's got to be just something more I can focus on, positively. And then at the same time, I'm realizing my prosecutor job is difficult. I did child abuse and neglect practice. So basically, in and out, I have to think about my clients. There was never a break.
Let's unpack a couple of these things really quickly. So a lot of times when people go into a high-profile job like that, there are one of two reasons. One is it's a passion for it that drives them to it, and the other is, as a society, we recognize doctors, lawyers, and certain other careers as successes, and so maybe there's a push into it whether you're interested in it or not. Which were you? Did you go into law because you were sincerely passionate about justice, or did you go into it because you thought it would mean that you were successful and growing up feeling like you needed to survive, then you would have checked off that first box?
It's actually the latter. It's really to survive. I was pre-med in college.
Okay.
I was going to be a doctor, but then I was sitting in the OChem class. I remember this vividly, sitting in this big class at University of Washington with a bunch of like chemistry nerds, and I looked left and right, and I thought to myself, I don't think I can do this kind of thing for another few years studying science. I really felt like it wasn't my personality, because when you're a pre-med, you don't speak much. You actually just repeat information. And I felt like I had more opinion than most people on things. And so I decided, well, if I don't do medical school and I don't become a doctor like my parents wanted me to, what would I do with my life? And I realized I was majoring in social work then. So I was interested in helping people and making a change. But I knew there was no money in social work, and that was the survival issue that came up.
Right.
Like, I can't tell my parents I'm going to be the social worker for the rest of my life. Then they're going to tell me to find a rich guy, So I had to figure out another way. And I thought about it, and I said, lawyer, I don't have anyone in my family who's a lawyer, and lawyers have bad reputations. So I was actually reluctant to do it. And then I actually analyzed it more and realized, you know what, as a social worker, you're an advocate. It's the same thing as a lawyer. There's similarities in terms of, because it's advocacy. It's just that I'm going to be in court or arguing legal stuff instead of like social aspects of things.
So what I think is interesting, what you're essentially saying is, so you weren't passionate about law, but you were passionate about improving the lives of other people, and you found a way to combine the two so that you could say, well, let me get the successful career, but also feel like I'm having an impact and have some sort of passion for that. And so that is what drove you into helping children, right?
Yes, I wouldn't say I was a law nerd. I mean, it's not like I like to watch politics and say, oh my God, it's so interesting. It's more about the impact that I wanted. I think that was the main purpose really for me. And even now, the impact is still the same thing that drives me. People think I became a nomad because I'm just, sort of in a midlife crisis mode, or sort of like, I just want to be a bum. To actually quit your lawyer job and do something else, the drive is still there. It never left me. The idea of impact is still there. It's just a different kind of impact now, and the execution is a bit different.
And you said you were dealing with abused children.
Yes.
So that's got to be tough for an entirely different reason. You've got to feel good when there's a success, when you improve the situation, but I'm sure there's so many times that you couldn't improve the situation, or you just have to see things that you don't want to see and don't want to recognize are a reality. Did that start to impact the way you looked at that career?
Yes. I think one thing I want to say is, for 15 years that I did it, there was a lot of passion and a lot of emotion behind it, definitely. But a lot of the emotion is hidden. It's a strange kind of role as a lawyer. It's not the typical lawyer role where you just push papers and create arguments. There's a lot of emotion behind it. But the funny, ironic thing about it is you cannot be emotional.
Right, because you need to seem like you're in charge.
Yes, right. Everything has to be logical, even though it's such an emotional practice. So I struggled with that for 15 years. A lot of the people in my office said you can only last here for 3-4 years. If you're over that, I don't know what you're doing here. You're just insane. One thing I realized, it did desensitize me over time, and it scared me because, to be honest, it's a personal reason also why I quit the job. My mom passed away in 2017, last year. I think I was shocked to kind of find myself sort of so desensitized that when my mom passed away, when people asked me about the details, I was talking like it's a case.
Right.
Sort of like, this is a trauma. This is now my trauma. This isn't another child's trauma, another case name, right? It's me. But when people ask me about it, I'm like talking like, well, this is what happened, but there was no emotion. I couldn't figure out what the emotion is, but maybe because I've learned to control it so much.
Right.
I was so puzzled, like, why am I not feeling anything or not allowing myself? So it took a while for me to finally find the emotion right after, like, I quit my job. It took months before. actually, the outdoors helped me a lot on that. So that was a trigger for me. I didn't realize that the job can also be detrimental on my end. I didn't realize mentally that it has affected me for so long, that something like that happened. That's finally, then it became obvious, But before that, I would have probably just kept going at it because I thought it was healthy.
Right. Yeah, that is a very interesting side effect of something like that, that it could separate you so much from reality because you have to, that you then separate yourself from your own life.
Yeah.
And so, as you said a few moments ago, you said the outdoors started to help you cope with that. So if you're doing this kind of work all the time, how did that start to bleed into your life? You didn't have probably ample free time to just say, oh, well, let me see what new activity I want to take up for this weekend. So how'd you end up discovering that stuff?
Well, it was already like maybe 2-3 years into my career when I realized I got to do something else to take myself out of this equation, because even if I'm in Washington, D.C. hanging out in the city, I still think about my job. It's like there's no way to get out of it. So I realized I got to do something extreme, something so different I've never done in my life. And that's when hiking came around. Through meetup.com, which is sort of became a big thing in Washington, D.C. A lot of people are
out
transplants.
Here also, yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay. So it became a big thing in D.C. where a lot of transplants like me wanted to meet people because we were all by ourselves coming to Washington, D.C. for a career. That's when the hobby kind of came in. Let me just figure out what hobby I want to check out. And that ended up being hiking. And the first time I hiked, I hated it actually because it turns out the people on the trails are type A. Like maybe it's a DC thing, but they're all running on the trail. I'm like, wait a second, I wanted to do something different from my lawyer thing, but it turns out these people are all the same. They all want to win. They all want to be the first. And so I was turned off by the whole thing at first, and then I thought I gotta stay in it because it was kind of nice being in nature, but I just didn't like the people. And so I eventually just found the people and I stuck with it, and then I found friends, and then I became a hike organizer. And that's when that whole hiking organization and leading trips led to Peak Explorations, which is my company, because I discovered my other skill that I never realized I had. And that's how my company kind of came about, because of Meetup. I was doing it for almost 15 years of organizing.
And so did you start Peak Exploration through Meetup?
Yeah, actually, unofficially, Peak Exploration was happening even before it was named Peak Exploration. It was a hobby. It was what I would usually do is start out, as a hiker, I started out leading trips because not a lot of people want to lead trips.
Right.
To be honest, a lot of people just want to follow.
It can be a lot of responsibility.
Yes. From there, because I love traveling overseas, I kind of combine hiking with overseas travel, and that's when I started thinking maybe I can take people to Nepal or New Zealand and Mongolia. Maybe people will sign up. And lo and behold, people did join me. And these are perfect strangers. People actually think it's insane. It's like, why do you just go with people you don't know? You've never met them, and then you meet in another country. And I said, I think the risk is low. They got to go enter immigration. They have to have passports.
It is a really, really long play if someone's plan is, yes, let me sign up for this trip that costs lots of money, go to another country so I can meet another person, and then maybe do it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So I say, logically, it's not going to happen. It's very unlikely. Versus doing something locally in a national park. You know what I mean? So I thought, it was an experiment in the beginning. I wanted to see if people are going to join me. And before that, I made a decision to travel overseas with or without people. So that's when I became into solo traveling as well. So I'm very comfortable going by myself. I mean, it's almost like I've trained myself to do this for such a long time. Then I bring people through the trips that I organize. It's a mixture of both.
Let's talk a second about that solo travel, because I'm sure as a woman, you've gotten those people who think they're helping you out, who have been like, oh, you can't go by yourself. That's too dangerous. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, you're sure you can't find some guy to go with you? I'm sure you got all that, right?
Yes.
Did you find that some of those comments people were making actually made you a little fearful and you had to overcome that? Or did you say, screw you, I can do whatever I want, and I'm going to show you by going by myself?
My first trip solo was Guatemala. This was years back, and I wanted to have a purpose for it. It was in between jobs after I did my clerkship. I didn't have a job lined up, and then the prosecutor job came. And my mom was so worried that she actually was trying to bribe me and pay me back the money that I paid for the airplane, plus extra money to just stay. Because she said, why are you going to Guatemala to learn Spanish? My excuse was I'm going to learn Spanish for a purpose like education, But really, I wanted to travel solo.
Right.
A lot of the people who actually actually discouraged me were people who cared about me or like my loved ones.
Right.
Not any kind of just strangers. The strangers, they do kind of say little silly things like, why are you going to do it by yourself? It's lonely, where's your guy? Why don't you go with a friend? But the people who actually discourage me the most are the ones who actually know me very well. But over time, to be honest, you just do it. And then that actually shuts a lot of people up. The more you do it, the more they realize she can handle herself. Right. That's just who she is, and I'm trusting her more that she'll be fine. And now my family's okay. It was like the weirdest conversation in the Philippines when my mom passed away. I had to tell my dad and everyone, because they said, did we hear that you are quitting your lawyer job to become a mountain nomad? I mean, can you imagine that conversation with your family? So, I prepped my family for a while before I did that, because I've been doing this for 15 years. Right. I'm crazy. I'm
You're
a
like,
bit
no,
insane.
I saved up money. I'm retiring early.
Actually, it's because I said I established an LLC.
Oh.
So I have a company. I mean, I do have a company, but, of course, it's still nerve-wracking because they're looking at me. You invested so much money and time as a lawyer, and it's true. That was probably one of the hardest things I've had to decide to do.
Right, just to walk away from that.
Yeah, exactly. I have nothing against being a lawyer. I love what I did. It's just a matter of what I loved more. It's really a nice energy when I did the shift. You know how some people want to leave something because they hate it?
Yeah.
And they're in a negative mindset, and I just need to get away because I'm miserable. I didn't have that. It felt to me like falling in love. It's like I found this thing, and I just want to follow it. And it's the mountain.
Well, something that we culturally do is we convince ourselves that we basically have 3 stages of life, right? One is childhood, where everyone else does everything for you. Then adulthood, where you're going to find a career, maybe raise a family, and that is all you're going to be allowed to do until you retire. And then that's the 3rd phase, and that's when you're allowed to do whatever you want. But you're never guaranteed that part of life, and you're also not guaranteed that by the time you would reach that, you're capable of doing anything.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's very hard to convince yourself, yes, let me start a new phase of my life right now. When everything culturally is telling me that's not allowed, and that's crazy.
I agree. And you know what I'm realizing? Because to be honest, I feel like when I quit my lawyer job, it feels like leaving a matrix. It really does. People ask me, how do I become a nomad? I do warn people, you have to really think about it, because you can lose people in your life too. People get intimidated by someone leaving the matrix because it's a reflection. I've had all these friends who are doing 9 to 5. Now they don't know what to do with me. It's almost as if they look at me and like, I know it's cool what you're doing, but I don't understand it. And it scares them because they're questioning their own life. It's a huge responsibility, you know what I mean? It affects other people too, your friends, your family. It's not an easy decision to make, and people always kind of think that being a nomad is just basically giving up or being in a bad place. No, it's not. It's actually the opposite. And I want to also demystify that. Like I in my writing and my media platform, I would talk about how to become a nomad, or I give people some advice, or I talk to them about my journey, because I want people to understand that being a nomad doesn't mean you're a bum and you're directionless in life. Actually, it's actually more purposeful for some of us. I don't think I've ever waken up anymore where I feel that dreaded feeling. Mm-hmm. I used to have that for years. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
You wake up at 6 a.m., you're going to go to work, and you have that feeling. It's like just dragging you. I don't have that anymore. It's amazing. And I thought to myself, why do I want to go back to that? Like, this is beautiful right here where I am. And I think that's how life should be. We only live once, really. I mean, it's really true. My mom passing suddenly. I mean, I think when you have someone so close that just you lose, it becomes much more like in your face. You're gonna die one day.
Life is finite.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the things where you tell yourself, well, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. You realize you have fewer days left to make that happen.
Yeah. And your body is not going to be the same the way it is now, and then compare 10 years later. I mean, that's
especially
really reality.
If you aren't doing the things that you want to do later in life that are physical. Mm-hmm. Earlier in life, you assuredly aren't going to maintain your body to a degree that you can begin to do those things later.
Yeah. Exactly.
So let's explain to people, you say last year, you thought it was further back in time, but last year is when you decided to walk away from being a lawyer and become what you're calling a nomad. So explain to people what it means to be a nomad and how you are surviving now.
You know what's so funny? The nomad word has been on my mind lately because a fellow nomad person I met in Colorado said, you should never tell people you're a nomad. I'm like, why? But I don't know what's the other word for it, but because he's saying, because when you say we're nomads, it's like we're homeless. And
right.
I guess there's a stigma. Being a nomad really means that you value something that not most people value. And actually that's freedom. And when I say freedom, I don't want to say, yay, I have all the free time in the world. I'm not talking about free time.
Right.
I'm actually talking about freedom in a sense of creativity, freedom of the mind, freedom of everything. Just you own yourself and your thought and your body and everything. And the thing is, it's great that I practiced for 15 years because I saw the contrast. I knew what I mean. I know what I'm thinking when I say this. It's because the 15 years that I spent, slowly I feel like I was just being controlled by something out of myself. It could be like my work, it could be other people, it's society, everyone else. You're just getting sucked into it.
Right, you feel like you're a cog in a machine.
Yes, yeah. And there's really truth to that. I mean, at least in my life, where I loved the career, but in the end I realized my thoughts were not mine. They don't belong to me. They belong to the organization that I work for. So one thing I realized as a nomad is it's like taking ownership of your own thoughts and your creativity, taking ownership of your purpose, of the direction in life. Like I feel like when I create something, let's say I write an article or I do a trip or lead a trip and do something and hike JMT, that's me. That's 100% Marinel. That's not the office of the Attorney General in Washington, D.C. You know what I mean? Like, that's freedom. The ultimate freedom is just being authentically you. And that's really what being a nomad means. I think people always kind of just look at the external and say, you don't have a home, so you're homeless. Yeah, you don't have this, and so you're like, whatever, you're floating. Actually, floating is not a bad thing. Being sort of flowing and no definite place, no definite sort of attachment is a good thing too, because that means you're adapting, you're growing all the time.
There's a misconception that there is only one correct path through life, and that anything that deters from that is a mistake, or you are homeless, or that you're aimless, or you don't know what to do. And the reality is that there can be multiple paths for different people, and that the solutions to one problem isn't always the same for every person.
Yeah. If there's any impact I'd like also, I wish the people that have chosen a career that's stable, like being an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, I want to send a message that you can make a change. You don't have to be a lawyer the rest of your life. I think we're so brainwashed to think that whatever career or major we did in college, we should stick with it. I don't think that's true. I think it's unhealthy, especially if you have a voice saying you should do this creative thing, you should pursue something else. I mean, it's okay if you're happy being an engineer, you know what I mean? But if there is a voice telling you you're no longer happy with your job, you need to listen to what it is that you want to do, and it's okay to make the change. I think we're so afraid to change because we're brainwashed to think that once you have that career, you just go up the ladder, and that's the point of life.
When you were mentioning earlier about waking up, that moment where you wake up and then you are not looking forward to your day and you're regretting that day is ahead of you, I have certainly had many of those days in the past, and I feel like when anyone is having those days repeatedly, that is a sign that a change needs to happen. That change doesn't necessarily have to be the change you made, which is become a nomad, but some change needs to happen in your life so you don't wake up every day feeling that way, because who wants to live 80 years or whatever and they regretted 80% of the days they woke up?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be quit everything and sell your house like I did and be sort of floating around. You do have to figure out what change you need. And it could be a small change, it could just be move to another company, right? The moral of the story is you have to listen to that voice. I have so many friends in Washington, D.C. that, to be honest, I would now see them and I feel really bad for them because it's like they'd see me so animated about life. And then when I ask them about their lives, it's the same script. And I'm thinking in my head, I think there's got to be a change that has to happen, but who am I to tell them that, right? So,
like we were saying, those changes can be simple. Those changes can be, my kids always say they're interested in this thing. So then take your kids to do that thing and then see if maybe you're interested too. Participate with your kids.
Yeah.
Or find a new hobby. It can be small things that have a big impact later.
Sure.
Let's talk about what your life has looked like since you quit being a lawyer and became a full-time nomad. That year or so that it's been. Let's talk about what your life has looked like from that moment. And before we get into that, let's talk about that first day when you woke up and you're like, I'm not a lawyer anymore.
Yeah, the I'm not a lawyer part. Wow, that's an interesting point. When was that feeling? Wow.
It probably took a while to sink in, right?
It did. I mean, sorry, I hate to say this. I don't think I can give you a date.
You just thought you were on a long vacation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Until one day it's like, wait, I'm not ever going to go back? Wait, okay, that's good. Because you know how it happened for me? I actually had a plan, believe it or not. I said to myself, in 2018, I'm going to quit my career. I'm going to save a lot of money. I'm going to start a company in 2016, and I'm going to run it slowly, take my time, and then just do whatever work on the side I could do, like a side hustle. And then my mom passed away in May of 2017. Here's the interesting thing. The day she passed away, that was May 19, was the last day I was a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because
was it planned?
No.
It was partly because of that.
Yeah, life just happened.
Right.
So I remember the day when I got the message she passed away. She died in the Philippines, so I had to travel overseas.
Right.
So when I walked onto the office that Friday morning, I told my boss, my mom passed away. She goes, get out of here. I was prepping for a trial for Monday that day, and it was weird. It's like, okay, so she said, just get out of here, get out of the office. The day that she passed away was the day I left. And that was the last time I was technically a lawyer practicing.
So at some point you said, I'm not coming back.
So they gave me the months off. I can't explain this, but people have been baffled by how do I get an office that's just so nice. They give me so much time because you won't believe how much time they give me in terms of a break. But I feel like it's just like fate stepping in, because being a prosecutor, it's a traditional job. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of vacation time, but they were so nice. They said, just take as much time as you need. I'm like, take as much time as I need? What does that mean? It's like indefinite?
That might be 30 years.
I know, exactly. I mean, can I actually not work for a few years? That was May, and then I think my boss just basically said, just let us know by such and such, maybe in a couple, 2-3 months or something like that. And they did give me some sort of extra leave that I could use, whatever leave that I had left. And then towards the end, when they did check up on me, I think I kind of even asked for an extension because I couldn't decide, which is so weird. Like, these guys are just so nice. And then all of a sudden, I think it was officially in August. This is how it happened when I did the resignation. It's by email. So I sent an email to my boss. I was in California. I was actually on my way to trekking Ray Lakes Loop in Sierra Nevada. And this was in August, September time last year. And I sent the email. I was at IHOP. There was internet. I had my laptop. And I said, here we go. I'm going to do my resignation. I've never resigned in my life.
Okay,
this is my very
what were you
first
eating
time.
at IHOP? That's what everybody wants to know.
It was breakfast. Definitely breakfast.
That is the only right answer for IHOP.
Yeah,
all right,
it's
continue.
breakfast. So I had to eat because I had to borrow the Wi-Fi. So I had to do it on my
I've
laptop.
done the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's not like I'm a big fan of IHOP, but So anyway, so I actually sent the email, and the next thing I did was drive into Kings Canyon so I can disconnect with no internet because I didn't want to hear anything
Right,
bad
you didn't
from
want them
my
to talk you
office.
out of it.
No. But it was the best decision I made when I got to Kings Canyon, because I did Ray Lakes for 5 days and I hiked solo for 5 days. I thought if I have any regrets, I hope I don't, because I didn't want to have that once I was walking and hiking.
Right.
And I didn't have any. So I think that was the moment, I think, when I realized, like, wow, this is it. This is the transition. So, yeah.
So we've talked about the day, quote unquote, that you quit, which turned into the months over which it took to quit. You went and hiked in the Sierra. What's it been like since then?
So
what do your days look like now?
After the Sierra, I think that was when it started becoming real that I have a company and I'm doing it full time. My focus was on running the company and building it and trying to figure out what it's about. And I think that's one thing you learn as an entrepreneur. It's really learning what it's about. And the branding means what is the purpose. Turns out it's all about you, really, actually. It's fascinating that I didn't realize having a company can be very personal. You're really invested in it. So what I did was, after that, I started focusing on the company and I started looking at the trips that I have and what focus I wanted, because I wanted impact. I didn't want to just market treks in Kilimanjaro and Nepal and Mongolia, the Caucasus Mountain Republic of Georgia, all the places that I've been to. So I ended up realizing that what I wanted to do was to focus on, on the trekking tourism industry, in which, like, if there are gaps, that I want to fill it. And over the years that I've been trekking, I realized a lot of the women that I met in other countries don't get to partake in the trekking tourism industry as guides or porters or working in the industry even.
Right.
So I wanted to make the change. I wanted a shift because as a woman of color, and I'm Filipina, I realized a lot of the travel companies, they would go to a country and they would just hire people there, but not really give them that ownership of the tourism. I ended up working with indigenous women in India and Peru, and I wanted them to be part of the company in terms of just basically focusing on women empowerment. So that's sort of like what the company is about. But it's not only the women, it's the marginalized groups all over the place. Like in the Philippines, I'm working with the Sultan in Mindanao, tribe in Mindanao. They want to create a tourism industry there. So I'm trying to figure out a way to have them be the one to lead those trips instead of just a foreigner coming in.
Right.
And basically just
hey, let me show you how to do
exactly.
this right. Yeah.
So they're going to run the show because it's their country, it's their home, it's their locality. So I wanted to create that. And that goes in hand with really just diversifying, creating inclusion and equity in the trekking tourism industry, to be honest.
So one of the other things you do is Brown Gal Trekker. Is that directly linked into this same discussion, or is that a separate thing altogether?
It is linked to the company because that's when I write articles on just experiences that I've had as a hiker mainly and an explorer, but also any challenges. I mean, some of my writings are political. I've attended Outdoor Retailer a few times and I wrote articles about the diversity issue with the industry, and that kind of went viral, and I've had some people like consult with me about what to do with inclusion and diversity in the outdoor industry, and I'm like, wow, So Brown Gal Trekker is really a media site, but I actually write about controversial things that people don't want to talk about. That's my thing, and I think that's really what I want to do is I want to fill in the gaps. I really don't want to recreate things that people are already doing,
right.
Because why would I want to do that? I didn't want to quit my lawyer job just to be another whatever company copying everyone else. That's really what I've been doing lately is trying to figure out the gaps and how I can fill those gaps. I can create something new and then people can follow it later on. For example, the indigenous women, if that becomes a big thing and it becomes like a norm, it becomes normalized, a lot of the local operators in other countries will follow suit, and that will create more jobs for women. So I'm trying to just basically start something new that no one has ever thought about. I think what happens in any industry is we get stagnant, right? We get sort of like complacent. We're just going to do the same trips. We do Inca Trail all the time. But people don't know that there are other trails around the Andes Mountains, and they're much more gorgeous. Some of it looks like Iceland. I've done some of them. And then they would take you to Machu Picchu. And the women, the indigenous women, Quechua women, can guide you. So these are like breakthrough type of trips that people have not thought about, that I feel like someone needs to start it, because I'm not going to live forever. So I'm going to pass this on to people. The idea will be passed on and, it'll grow.
So is it peakexploration.com?
Yes.
So what would a person go there for? Would they go there to try to organize a trip? Would they go there to try to help out with some of these ideals? What would take somebody listening to Peak Exploration?
Peak Exploration is where people can sign up for trips. We have like different groups. This is what I've been doing all these years as a lawyer, or even, when I was still working, I would take people overseas. So I organized the trips, and now it's all organized through the local operators that I work with, and we focus on sustainable tourism in the indigenous communities. So for example, I have women leaders, the Ladakhi women in India right now they're actually managing my group in India right now. They're trekking in the Marka Valley in Ladakh, which is the Indian Himalayas. So things like that. So people can sign up for trips that are focused on women empowerment, or it could be regular trips to Mongolia, like the Altai Mountains, Kilimanjaro. So if they go there, there's going to be a bunch of group departures that they can join in. So it's focused on solo travelers as well.
These are activities they can sign up for. They don't have to go on these trips with you. You help them organize these trips so that they can meet indigenous guides and go on their own schedule, right?
Yeah. So basically, I already sorted it out. I've actually actually organize everything, and I've tried the trip myself. All the trips that I have offered on the website are things I've done personally.
Right. So you vet everything ahead of time.
Yes, and this is one thing I noticed that's a gap in the travel industry. A lot of them don't even know what they're talking about. If you ask like some support about Kilimanjaro, you ask someone on the phone, it's like, have you been? It's like, no, I actually don't know anything about it. But they have notes, right?
We're actually in New Zealand. So
yes.
Right.
So that's kind of disappointing because I've went into that many times as a traveler. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. If you're a hiker, you want to know that the company really cares about hiking, and that's the authenticity part. And I think because I'm a hiker myself and I did it myself, people can ask me the question and I can answer directly. It's like, oh yeah, exactly. On this trail, this is what's going to happen. So I didn't like the inauthenticity when I was like doing research back in the day. And I'm like, why are these travel companies, they don't even know what they're talking about, So I wanted to offer people something that's authentic. That's something that where they know that it's almost like coaching in a lot of ways, because a lot of my clients, once they go on a trip, they ask me a lot of questions. And some of the questions I don't even think travel companies will answer. It's almost like I actually coach them and I prep them. And that's really the value that I think, that it's being brought to them, because I'm an experienced hiker. I do care that the fact that they succeed, something I care about. It's not just travel.
I imagine it's the difference between feeling like you've contacted your friend about a trip versus just contacting some organization that wants to generate income based on your trip.
Exactly. Even before Peak Exploration became an entity, a lot of the people sign up on my trip are repeat travel. They come back and sign up for my trips. And every year they ask me, Marinel, what are you going to go next? I want to go, let's go to Iran. Like, are you going to Iran? Because I want to go, I mean, I have people like that suggesting I should go organize this. They want me to do this, like it's my job. But to me, it's like creating relationships. Like they just trust you that you're going to deliver. So to me, it's more than just a company, to be honest. You know what I mean? I feel like this is just to actually create a community. So people know that they ever want to venture out and they want to explore, they can come to me in a company and say, hey, what do you got? What do you have for this year? I want to go somewhere.
On the side from that, you aren't only managing that company and doing all the various tricks and things you do, but you also are doing writing, correct? You write for a number of outlets. Don't you also have some books that you've written or are writing?
I did sort of a booklet. It's not like a full out, it's just a bunch of essays that I wrote when I traveled for a year. I went trekking solo in 21 countries one time. And so I kind of just had inspiration and just wrote some essays. So that book is on the website. I'm also like in the process of writing a book, but not until like after I finish all my hiking. There's a book idea coming up, but that's in the future. But yeah, so I do a lot of writing. So what I'm doing right now is contributing to a lot of outlets. Outside Magazine, Backpacker Magazine. I'm working with them on an article on India. Just anything that I've experienced as a hiker. Also like Matador Network is another one, which is a travel website. So right now I'm just kind of enjoying the freelance writing. I think it's funny because like as a lawyer, I feel like I may be boring as a writer because I'm gonna be honest, because like I have this one editor edit one of my articles, and it's a major magazine, and I think it's a storytelling kind of thing. And as a lawyer, if you ask me to tell you a story, you'd be like, shut up. Like, shut up, I object. Like it's kind of boring.
Yeah, here are the data points that you need to know about my activity.
It's really dry. So I submitted the content and he edited it, and I said, wow, this is nice. The way he words things and the way he structures things. So I'm learning a lot. It's a fascinating process. Just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you're a good storyteller. Do you know what I mean?
Right, of course.
Like you can argue and everything. I can give you a compelling argument, but
it's very different goals.
It is actually. So I'm really just like getting my feet wet in that realm. And there are articles I've written, like Adventure Journal published it, which is about the criticism of the outdoor industry. That went well because it was an argumentative one. But storytelling is still something that it's fascinating kind of work.
So let's talk about that article a little bit. So what was the problem you saw? What was your write-up?
Okay, so I went to Outdoor Retailer, which is the biggest conference for the outdoor industry brands. North Face is there, Patagonia, Nomad, REI, the big people, right? So I've been there twice. I went to the Colorado, but I went to the one last month, and then the one in January. I don't know if you've been to any of them.
I went a few years ago when it was still in Salt Lake.
Oh, okay, great. As a first timer in January, I was shocked with the industry. It was lagging in terms of diversity and inclusion and equity. I came from a legal background, and back in the day when I was in law school, diversity was an issue, like the affirmative action time. I went through all that. Then we were diversifying the legal field. It was really behind law firms, there weren't a lot of diversity. But things have changed over time in the legal profession. I think it's become much more normalized now. The whole racial diversity, everything, gender, it's changed over the years. So when I walk into outdoor retailer, it's such a big industry with thousands of people. I felt like whoosh, it's like, oh my God, it's like being in law school again. The feeling, it did feel as if it was a club of a certain specific group of people. And there were not much diversity in terms of thought and just background. And I think as a business owner, it's really important to have diversity. That's the sustainability issue because the times are changing. Statistics show that by 2044, there's going to be a major shift in the racial diversity of America. Now, if you're catering to a racially diverse group of people, you got to know what you're doing as a company. When I walked in, I just felt like there's something here that's just missing and lacking, and I don't know what the root of the problem is, whether it's just, not knowing what to do, or is it resistance? I kept an open mind when I first went into that conference. So I actually wrote the article based on my observations. I noticed that there is a diversity issue and that, I saw the panels. They talk about gender equality because Force of Nature by REI is a big thing, right? So they started looking at gender, but that's the only thing they looked at. They didn't look at the other stuff, which is like race and all the other things. So
there's a term for it also, right? The adventure gap, which is that separation.
Yes.
And James Mills wrote a book about
yes.
it.
Yeah, and James, I know James. Yeah, he's been in the industry forever, and he did talk about this. He did say, it's been just lagging. So basically, what I noticed about the outdoor industry, in a nutshell, is it's just behind when it comes to diversity, diversifying the industry. It's still a lot of men in leadership positions, a lot of white folks in leadership positions, but there's no diversity beyond that. But it's alarming because the market is changing. It's happening. So I wrote about it, and I wrote about the observations, and I just noted that there's got to be a shift. I didn't really say anything in terms of beyond just the observations, but when I wrote that article, I had a lot of backlash,
Sure.
Which is actually the fascinating part because I didn't, it was a very logical article. I kind of just wrote it like a legally minded person. I said, this is the problem, this is the issue, these are my observation and the facts, and in the end, I just made my conclusion. Actually, in the end, was people need to figure out a solution. I didn't even propose a solution. I just said it's gonna be a long way to get to diversity, inclusion, and equity status in the industry. I did say that people need to be uncomfortable because that's really just part of the process. But people didn't like the fact that I even made an observation. The backfire was sort of like accusing me of seeing things like I'm just imagining, which is fascinating.
I'm sure people were telling you were trying to stir up problems.
Yeah,
so
it's just a race card type thing.
Yeah.
It's another. There's no issue. And they always say, outdoors is welcoming to everyone. Yada 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 yada. But it is a structural. I'm talking about more of the structural, the industry itself having the issue. When I went to JMT, I didn't have any issue as a brown person, but the reality of it is it's the industry, the power structure, and the institution itself. You can't just say outdoors doesn't discriminate, there's no problem because you can go in the outdoors and there's no issue. It's really the power structure that you have to look at to see if it's equal at this point in time.
How has the fallout from that backlash settled? When was it that you wrote this article?
I wrote this in January of this year.
Oh, so it was pretty recent.
Yes.
So is it still ongoing, or have people calmed down and has a discussion started that isn't about emotion and reactionary feelings?
I think what came out of it that's good is you figure out who your allies are, the people who really care about the issue. So there's that part where people want to deny and they want to call you names and want to judge you. But there were also people who actually contacted me after that article, and then they said, can we talk to you about diversity? We want to just consult with you. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not even a veteran in this industry, but because I have a background in affirmative action and diversity issue back in the day, I have a little bit of insight of how the process works because I've been practicing for 15 years. And I think that's what outdoor industry is looking for. They want people from another industry sharing insight because there's cluelessness in the industry of like, well, I don't know. We've been doing this for years.
Right.
So how, it's like being outside the matrix, right?
Right. It's not that people were necessarily malevolent or have ill intentions. Sometimes they just aren't aware of something until somebody brings it up and points it out and then can help guide them.
Yeah. So I got those responses from people. They actually came to me and they wanted to talk about it. They weren't afraid to discuss it. The naysayers, what they usually do is they just make comments on the article, and other than that, they don't really do anything else. And if you offer to talk to them or whatever, they don't really reach out to you. It's still an ongoing issue. I went to the outdoor retailer just last month. There are these steps being taken by certain entities, and you kind of know who are the advocates for diversity. It's an interesting time right now, actually, for the outdoor industry. REI and all these big brands. It's like just a hot topic right now, and everyone's trying to figure out how to do it properly because we all want to be politically correct, I suppose, So that's the other thing, and that's a challenge for a lot of the big brands.
Yeah, and it's even outside that industry. It's all industries right now.
Yeah.
We're realizing that maybe we can all collectively include all people in all things.
Yeah.
Maybe if we do that and we attempt to do that, maybe we will find that there is a more positive end result than if we just continue doing the things we always do.
Sure.
As we've always done them. So we've spoken some about inclusivity in your business, and then this essay you wrote about outdoor retailer and the goals of your business. So let's talk about the future for you and for Peak Exploration and these same topics, because I feel like some of these topics are going to be part of the future you have planned for yourself and your business.
The reason why I care about the diversity, inclusion, and equity is because I actually, as a CEO of my own company, I have to learn about DEI. I have to learn about that because if you have a company that caters to people in America or other countries, offhand, it's a very diverse, the whole world I worked in is very diverse. I go to different countries for one, right? When I write that article, it's almost like I'm also talking to myself because the title of the article actually is The Inclusion Problem in the Industry When Money is the Bottom Line. And we're all for profit. And I'm going to be honest, my business is for profit. I don't have a nonprofit entity. I have an LLC, right? So when I wrote that article, I'm also talking to myself in some kind of way. I'm also reminding myself, like, is money the bottom line for me as a CEO of my company? Can I actually do philanthropy and have money in my mind as well, like combine the two together? Right. Where is the balance, right? I think to me, it's an ongoing debate in my head and an ongoing discussion. And I learn as I go because, like, for example, when I went to Peru, I learned more about the situation with the Quechua women, that they're weavers and farmers. They don't make a lot of money, and they've been excluded from the outdoor industry and the trekking industry. None of them were ever hired to become guides or porters even. And finally, my partner in Peru started this co-op company where the women actually own part of the company. With my company and his company, we're trying to change the partnerships and the dynamics of the trekking tourism industry. That requires a lot of diversity, knowledge, because to go to another country, and I'm an American and I'm Filipina, which is also a weird thing because it's like I'm not the typical American going to Peru. Right. I don't even know what they think of me. They may think I'm one of them, or they may think I'm still a foreigner. I don't even know. I have to have a discussion with them about that. For me to come there and then we discuss how to create this partnership, I have to be very sensitive to their culture and to the way they perceive these things, and that's diversity. And when you want to include and make it equal, you have to be very sensitive to how they perceive things. So to me, my business, it really is about diversity. With the future of my company, one day I really just want to create a healthy partnership with the local operators, because one problem we have in the trek and tourism industry is the exploitation. A lot of the big companies, and I'm not going to name names, which companies, because there are some that are really...
You can easily do a search and find conversations about exactly what you're talking about, especially in regards to the Himalayas.
Yes, like Himalayas or even, Peru or Mongolia, all these places, there's a company where they have, all the
trips all over the world covered, right? But the money stays outside the country that they're running their program in, and the locals are the ones that are they're the least benefiting, in terms of the money and the profit. So what I'm learning is that there's got to be another way of partnership with local entities in other countries to make it more equitable and inclusive. And that's really the goal of my company. That's the goal of Brown Gull Trekker, is really the inclusion and equity, just to basically create something new in the industry. And I think it goes hand in hand with the outdoor industry. So when I talk at the outdoor retailer to folks about like creating innovative ideas, I attended a workshop on diversity the last time. Whatever I say, whatever discussion happens there actually carries over to my own company, which is fascinating because I'm learning so much, pretty much there's a parallel between the two.
So if people have been listening to this and they're thinking, all right, I want to hear more about you, about your company, about where all of this goes, if they're interested in more about just your thoughts on all these things in general, where can they find more stuff from you?
I have two websites, basically Peak Explorations. You can find it at www.peakexplorations.com, which is where you'll find the trips that we run. And when you do sign up for those trips, you're supporting the local community and the local operators directly. I basically just partner with them. I'm kind of like their American partner. The whole show is run by them and they take ownership of the program. So if you want to join those trips, that would be great because that's a way to support the programs that we have and the projects that we have. And we have other projects underway. The Kilimanjaro trip, actually, we have a project where we're trying to work on how to create equity in which the women porters in Kilimanjaro can become guides, because in that country, it's very, very difficult for women to become guides. They stay as porters for years. So we do have a project like that. So when you support Peak Explorations and you sign up for a trip, you're supporting our projects and efforts towards, making it more equitable in the trekking tourism industry in that kind of regard. The other thing is my writing, just my travels. If you want to follow like the John Muir Trail that I just did recently, anything I do that's hiking related, you can find it on browngulltrekker.com. I also have a lot of advice on hiking and solo traveling on that website, so they can follow me there. I also have a Facebook page for both. It's you can just find it on Facebook, Peak Explorations or Brown Gull Trekker. It's just one page, and then Twitter as well and Instagram.
What I always like to do here at the end of the show before we finish it up is ask you if there's anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to discuss, or if there is a final thought that you'd like to leave everybody with based on what we've talked about so far.
I was thinking about a lot of things lately because I was on JMT solo trekking.
Right. How many days?
24 days. 22 days hiking.
22 days to think.
Yes. I had a lot of reflections, actually. People are fascinated about what I did with my life in terms of quitting a lawyer job. I think that's probably one of the most fascinating aspects of it. And I always feel like I have to justify it. Sometimes it gets a bit like, really, do I really have to explain? It's a bit tough. But then I understand. It's human nature. You're curious and you want to, maybe you do want to get something out of the conversation. You want to understand me because you're considering doing what I'm doing. There's a thought in my head when I was hiking, because I thought to myself again, like, why did I quit my lawyer job? It is quite an insane thing. And then one thing that came to mind for me is that people do ask me, how do you get to that point of becoming a nomad? And I'm nervous about answering that question a lot because I don't want to encourage you to quit your job.
Right.
I really don't want to be responsible.
And they get mad at you later.
Anyhow, because I'm a lawyer, right? I don't want liability. And I think people want me to tell them that. And I actually don't.
It's okay. And then they're like, I guess I'll go do it now.
Yeah, I don't want to ever say that. So I don't tell them. I think what I tell people really is, from here on, in terms of living your life, this is how I've been living my life now. I always ask myself, if I was in the process of dying, I know it sounds morbid, but this is my standard. I ask myself this question: if I'm in the process of dying, whatever I'm about to do or whatever I'm thinking of doing, is it going to put a smile on my face? Am I going to reflect back and say, man, that was an awesome thing that I did? And if it does, do it. Like the JMT. If I'm in the process of dying tomorrow, I'm going to definitely think about JMT and I'm going to be smiling when I think about it. As a nomad, I collect moments now. That's, to me, is my wealth. When I'm considering the next steps, like the future, you ask me, what are you going to do next? That's my standard. I always ask myself, if I do this, would this be a good investment? Because when I'm about to have my last breath, is it going to put a smile on my face when I think about it? And to me, that's my thing, my standard. And the other thing is, the next step, of course, is if it is going to put a smile on your face, are you courageous enough to do it? And all I want to say to people is, I've been traveling for so long. I've been to over 40, 50 countries alone. I've done a lot of solo traveling. One thing I learned is that a lot of the fear we have is an illusion, but our desire is real. When I say desire, it's that voice that's telling you, I think I want to go to this place, or I think I want to hike Everest Base Camp, or I think I just want to quit my job. And that's actually a true desire. That's true. There's actually truth to that. But a lot of the time, the fear that we have, those are the ones that are unreal. And that's what I learned for the years that I've been adventuring, is that whenever I have a fear on one end saying, don't do that, you're gonna die in Guatemala, and then then my voice says, I want to go to Antigua because the colonial town sounds really cool. I would love to do that, and it puts a smile on my face when I think about it. I realize between those two, the desire is the real thing. The fear is just a distraction. And so I go, and then I learn that that's really the case, and then I keep doing it over and over and over again. And that's what I've learned over the years, is that most of our fears are illusions, but the voice really is the truth. And the two things that I would really want to treasure the rest of my life from here on with my company and my media side is to stay true to my truth, to be authentic, to be real to that voice, and to just keep a good energy. Because when you have both the truth and the energy together, magical things happen, and it just can't go wrong. So I know it sounds kind of wacko, but I think I spent a lot of time in JMT, and I realized that the best moments have always been when it's authentic, and I just keep a good energy, a good vibe, and the positivity.
I think those are great sentiments to leave everybody with. See, I knew you'd have something.
Yeah.
You thought you were gonna have to pick. You thought you were gonna have to pick
forgot.
somewhere. I knew something would come out, and I think those are great sentiments for us to leave everybody with. Thank you for coming and meeting me. I know you've been off in the wilderness for a month, away from places like where we're sitting right now, the Grand Park in downtown Los Angeles, full of people and excitement.
Yeah, it's interesting. Got a waterfall with colors in it.
Yeah, just like you probably saw in the JMT all the time. So thank you again.
Sure.
And these days, Marinel can be found bouncing between DC and the Cusco region of Peru, where she is researching the trekking tourism area there and working with the local Quechua community to further the opportunities you can find with peak explorations. She also will be featured in the upcoming She Explores book, which will be coming out in March. And now is the time where I tell you all to run to our website, gogetoutside.com, and there you will find this episode 76 with Marinel de Jesus. You will find numerous photographs of her in action, trekking across the globe, and you will find links to everything we talked about in today's show, including the OR article we discussed and a link to that She Explores book, should you want to pre-order it. And as always, if you'd like to get in touch with us here at the show, let us know what you thought about this episode, a past episode, a future episode, or an episode you'd like to see exist. You can send us an email, go@butcherbirdstudios.com, or if you prefer, leave us a voicemail, 818-925-0106. And as always, I implore you, run to your podcast purveyor of choice. Make sure you subscribe to this show, rate it, review it, and please share it with someone who you think will enjoy it. This episode of the Go Get Outside podcast was produced, recorded, and edited by me, your host, Jason Milligan. Additional help was supplied by Griffin Davis, and as always, it was brought to you by Butcherbird Studios. Next time on the show, come back January 16th, we'll be talking to Tom Jones. If you are a member of the canyoneering community, I think you should be looking forward to this episode. Tom Jones is the creator of Imlay Canyon Gear, and it is quite likely that you use one of his ropes, backpacks, or one of his other pieces of gear when you go out into the canyons. And he is also the person who wrote the book on Zion's technical canyons. So come back January 16th, Tom Jones. See you then.